ever feel like you're kind of always on?
Yeah.
Like even when you should be off the clock, there's that urge to check your work email just in case
Yeah.
you're not alone. Today we're diving into this whole right to disconnect thing that's been getting attention lately.
Right.
We found this really interesting article from a French communications agency, and it gets into what the right to disconnect actually means. Like it goes way beyond just turning off notifications.
I see.
So maybe we can start by unpacking that. What does the right to disconnect really mean in practice?
Well, I think it's about, power. Empowering employees to detach from work tech outside of work hours.
Okay.
And without the fear of, repercussions. Like, imagine no more Sunday night anxiety about a Monday morning inbox explosion.
Oh, yeah. I think a lot of people can relate to that.
Right.
That feeling of having to be always on, even if it's at the expense of our own time and well-being.
Exactly.
The article actually calls it hyperconnectivity, and it sounds like it's more than just annoying, right?
Yeah. That constant barrage of information and the demands on your time, it can really be bad for you. We're talking stress, messed up sleep, even a higher risk of burnout. It's not just feeling overwhelmed, it's deeper than that.
I see. So it can have some real consequences.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, does being hyperconnected actually make us more productive?
That's a good question. And research suggests that actually it doesn't.
Really?
Yeah. When our minds are constantly bombarded with stimuli, our ability to, really focus and think, it actually declines.
Interesting.
It's like trying to drink from a fire hose. You get a lot of water, but can you really absorb any of it?
I guess not. So disconnecting could actually make us more productive.
Yeah. It's about working smarter, not just harder, giving your mind the space to recharge and refocus.
Makes sense. But how do we actually do that in a world that feels like it demands our constant attention?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. The article points to France. They've actually started legally implementing frameworks around this right to disconnect.
Wow. So it's not just a nice idea, it's becoming law.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. So in 2016, France passed this law. It's called El Khomri. And basically it says that companies with, over 50 employees,
Okay.
they have to negotiate policies about this right to disconnect thing outside of work hours.
Wow, that's pretty big. So what are companies actually doing to follow this law? Are we talking no emails after 6 p.m.?
It's not really about strict rules. It's more about,
Yeah,
creating a culture of respect for people's boundaries.
I see.
The law really emphasizes negotiation between employers and employees. So some companies, they've made guidelines about email etiquette.
Right.
Encouraging people to not send non-urgent messages outside of work hours.
Makes sense.
Some places are doing digital detox initiatives.
Oh, interesting.
Or, they're doing training programs to help employees manage their tech use.
Right. So it was more about giving people the tools and the support to kind of figure it out themselves.
Exactly. And prioritize well-being, which is important.
Yeah, for sure. But it can't all be on the employer, right? I mean, individuals have to take some responsibility too, don't they?
Absolutely. Companies have a role to play, but individuals need to own their digital habits too. The article had some tips actually for setting boundaries.
Oh, I'd love to hear those. What did it say?
Well, one simple but powerful thing is to decide on your work hours and stick to them.
Okay.
As much as possible. I mean, tell your colleagues and clients when you're available and try not to, answer every notification right away.
Yeah, that makes sense. Be more intentional with your time and attention rather than letting technology control everything.
Right.
But honestly, turning off notifications and ignoring that inbox can be so hard.
Oh, yeah.
So do you have any advice for dealing with that temptation?
Mindfulness. The article suggests taking digital breaks throughout the day, even if it's just for a few minutes. Get away from your screens, stretch, take a walk, do something that isn't digital.
Right, like hitting the reset button. I know I always feel so overwhelmed after hours of screen time.
Yeah.
And stepping away, even just for a little bit, really helps me come back with, a fresh mind. But what about people who have trouble setting boundaries in the first place? Any advice for them?
One thing they suggest is to have specific times and places for work stuff.
Okay.
Create a dedicated workspace, even if it's just a corner of your kitchen table or something.
Yeah.
And only use it for work. That can help you separate work and personal life in your mind, so when you're not in that space, you can actually disconnect.
That's a really good tip, like a physical and mental boundary.
Yeah.
In the space, it's work time. out of the space you can switch off.
Exactly.
But let's be real, sometimes work just spills over into our personal lives.
Right.
Emergencies happen, there are deadlines. So how do we deal with that and still protect this right to disconnect?
It's all about balance. Boundaries are important, but so is flexibility. Like if you have to work late one night to finish something, that's fine. But then take some time for yourself the next day.
Compensate.
Right. It's about finding a rhythm that works for you and your well-being along with your work. This right to disconnect, it's not about never working outside of, the typical 9 to 5.
Right.
It's about having the choice, deciding when and how you engage with work technology instead of feeling like you're constantly chained to it.
So it's about taking back control over your time and your attention. And like the article says, that can change things in a big way.
Yeah.
Not just for our well-being, but for how we work and live, too. So it seems like this right to disconnect thing, it's about way more than just, like, turning off our phones, right?
Definitely. It's about being more mindful, finding a better balance between work and life, especially now when tech is everywhere.
Yeah.
The article actually suggests that embracing this right could, it could lead to less stress and burnout, but also more creativity, maybe even more productivity and happiness overall.
Yeah, that makes sense. When I'm feeling super overwhelmed and burnt out, I definitely can't think creatively or connect with people the way I want to.
Right. When you give yourself the space to disconnect from all that, the demands of the digital world, it creates space for new ideas and for those like deeper, more meaningful connections with people.
I see. So it's not just about like protecting ourselves from the bad stuff. It's about like unlocking our potential, both personally and professionally.
Exactly. Reclaiming your time, your attention, ultimately your life, right?
Right.
It's a powerful thing, this right to disconnect, for creating a more fulfilling way of being in the world, a more sustainable way.
That's really interesting. I feel like this deep dive has really opened my eyes to this whole idea of setting boundaries and being more intentional with how I use technology. What's like the one thing you hope people will take away from our conversation today?
Well, I hope they'll, take a look at their own relationship with technology and think about ways to like integrate these principles into their lives, whether it's setting digital curfews, scheduling some device-free time, or just being more aware of when and how they're using tech. Even small changes can make a difference for their well-being and their quality of life.
Yeah, absolutely. This has been a great conversation, really insightful. I feel like I have a whole new perspective now.
Good.
We talked about a lot today, from the laws in France to what companies and individuals can do to, create healthier digital habits. But this is just the beginning. We really encourage you to, keep exploring this idea, maybe even do some research yourself and think about, what areas in your own life could benefit from embracing this right to disconnect thing. Could it bring you more well-being, creativity, fulfillment? Because at the end of the day, the most valuable knowledge is the stuff we actually use in our own lives.
That's very true.
Thanks so much for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.